This is a brief tutorial and technical overview of the Podtopic Auto 380 that is meant to complement the tutorial that we've done on the Podtopic semi-automatic machine. So as you can see, the main difference of this machine is from here to here is the automatic deep pile feeder, where I can stack my sheets of paper and they'll automatically be fed into the machine. What I'd like to start with first is a quick overview of the different parts of the automatic feeding system, and then I'll come back to the screen itself and go through all the different functions, as this control panel is completely different from the other machines. This is the feeding head. The feeding head is what actually picks the paper up and feeds it into the machine. You can see that very basic. On the back here I have paper stops, which are going to go against the stack of paper. I have air blow nozzles that are going to blow air into the sheets to fluff them up. This is the foot of the feeder. It's going to do two functions. It's going to come down and sit on top of the paper to keep it from moving. It also, right here, has two small holes which put air out underneath the sheet that's being fed to give it structure and help it go into the feeder. Hiding back here in between these two, these are the double sheet retarders, or fingers as we call them, that will keep multiple sheets from being fed. Finally, and most importantly, up under here we have the sucker feet. This is what's going to mechanically come down, pick up these sheets with suction, and advance them into the machine. Coming up top, this is the feeder height adjustment. Physically raises and lowers the whole feeding assembly up and down by turning this knob. And that is in relation to how high it is at the front here when the pile comes up to be fed in. On this side of the feeding head, this is an air control valve. And what this actually controls here is the air blast that goes to these air nozzles here to fluff up the pile. Now all of these 6 components on the back of the machine here, the 2 paper stops, the 2 fingers, and the 2 air blasts, can be adjusted both left and right depending on the paper size. They can also be adjusted in height by these knobs. So I simply lift them up and I can turn this knob to raise that up or lower it down. The final thing I have on the feeder is a knob for the position of the actual feeding head. So you can see it's on these rails and it slides in depending on my paper size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise that pile up until these are in line with the pile, and then bring it in and just lightly touch it, and then go ahead and lock that knob down. We'll get to that momentarily. The other parts of the feeder that are different than the regular machine is here where the sheets are fed into the machine. So I have a gate system. I have these brushes here, which ride against a driven black roller. I have these wheels here. These are what we call accelerator rollers. And then you can't see it, but underneath of these rollers, right about there, is the actual second gate, which comes up and stops the sheet from being fed. And when the sheet is ready to go, drops out of the way so the sheet can go in. The principle here is that the initial gate, or the first gate, is down here on a pivot rod. It's going to flop forward and allow the sheet to go to the black roller, where these brushes are going to give it just enough pressure against that black roller in the center to bring it up to the second gate. When that second gate drops down, these gray rollers are going to engage automatically, like that, go down, and they're going to feed the sheet through the rollers. 2 other components to position the paper pile on the feed bed are our side guides, which you can see here and here, and then the stack guide, which is on the left hand side of the pile. This is adjusted left and right by using the Allen key provided with the machine to loosen that small Allen head there, as well as one down below. And we move that left and right to justify the pile of sheets on the center of the machine. These here should engage the pile lightly when it's in the up position. And everything is adjusted by the one Allen key that comes with the machine. Last thing that's a little bit different is we have the pressure control gauge on this side of the machine. This is for the chrome roller pressure. It is on the non-operator side of the machine, where the semi-automatic machine is over here next to the pull roller disengage. Let's put the camera back on the tripod and I'll show you how this all works. I'm now going to go over the screen. This is much different than the regular semi-automatic Podtopic. It has a lot more buttons on it, but it's very straightforward. We can divide this screen into three sections, if you will. On this side, we have our actual physical adjustments to the machine while it's running. So things like our paper length, our speed, our cutting position, and our temperature. Our cutting on and off, that's for the flying knife. In the center, we have what I call the operation controls. So run, stop, and reverse, as well as the screen that tells us what's going on. On the right-hand side here, this is mostly for the feeder in this top box. So this is table up, table down, table stop, vacuum pump on and off, feeding head home, jog, and screen converter. The last button here in the bottom right is one that's not going to be used often, but it's very important. There's actually 3 different status screens on this machine that I can scroll through just by tapping that button. So this is the main screen here. And if you go through the things from top left down, you can see the job. So we have a job. We can recall jobs. It will bring up this last set speed, temperature, and sheet size. You can scroll through those jobs using the up and down arrows. We have the top. So that is the actual roller temperature. So right now, that is set at 32 degrees F, and if I press that, I can change that with the up and down arrows. Cut, that is the cutting position. So it's set at -2 millimeters from the default home position. L is the length of the sheet, which is currently I'm running 1319, so that's set at 13 and 22/30 seconds. Top right, I have speed, which is set at 3 meters per minute. Below that, I have the actual temperature of the roller. So over here, I have the set temperature. On the right-hand side, I have the actual temperature. So you can see that it's set at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Obviously, it's not that cold in here. It's actually reading 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Below that, I have a vacuum, whether it's X is off, O is on, and then I have the count for the job. As I go through the screens, this next one, you're going to see a lot of different aspects of the machine, and it is telling us the status. So you can see that it's not pressing the roller right now. The wheels are up, the shutters are closed, and the total count on the machine is 48 sheets. This is a brand new unit. The next screen shows a bunch of sensors and what their status is. Now, these 2 screens, primarily you're not going to use, but you may if you're talking to our tech support or need some help with a job. You'll often get asked to, hey, pop into the second screen or the third screen and send us a picture of what your settings are there so we can help you dial that in if necessary. So back to, let's go through these buttons in more detail. Speed. You can see it's illuminated in blue right now. Whatever is lit up in blue is the current function that you're accessing. So speed is set at 3. That is the default starting speed of this machine. I cannot change it in a stop position. But if I was running a job, I could use the up and the down arrows to adjust the speed up or down as necessary. Top speed on this machine is 12 meters per minute. It'll comfortably laminate at 10 meters all day long. The next button is paper length. So you can see how that illuminated blue. And again, I use the up and down arrows to simply set that. We normally set it about a 1/16 of an inch less than the actual paper length, and that sets the overlap between our sheets. The next button is job, which I've already talked about, but again, we can cycle through jobs, and you'll see the settings change here. That is going to go through the temperature, the speed, and the paper length that is set up. Cutting position, not something that we use a lot, but as speed increases, we may need to change when the blade fires across the sheet in relation to the overlap coming through. So we can go negative or positive to speed that up, have the knife fire sooner, or make it a bit later so that it doesn't go as fast. Temperature, self-explanatory. Again, up and down arrows to set it. If I press and hold, it's going to run up very quickly. Press and hold to go down. Generally, we're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 212 to 230 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on the film you're running. I have it set down here nice and low at 60 degrees now so that I don't get burnt in the tutorial. Up and down arrows, obviously I've been using those the whole time to change my settings. Cutting on and off is this bottom left button. This is only applicable once the machine is running. I have to be in a running state before I can turn the cutting on. Cutting home. If this knife in the back of the machine, I'm going to go ahead and move it right now. If for some reason it is not in the home position, I can press the cutting home button, and you heard that knife travel back to the home stop. Run, stop, and reverse we've covered already, pretty self-explanatory. Now this machine, all these buttons are automatic, so when I have it set up and I hit run, I don't need to press anything else. It's going to start the whole process itself, initialize and start feeding the sheets. Stop, exactly that. I'm going to stop, reverse, use with caution. Of course, it's only if you ever have a jam or something went wrong that we need to undo. It needs to be pressed and held for the machine to operate in reverse. And whatever's in the machine needs to be manually pulled back while you're pressing and holding reverse. Moving up here, table up, table down, table stop. So this machine has an automatic table down function. I can press it, it's going to go all the way down until it hits the bottom limit and stop. And that will allow me to load about 9 inches of paper into the feeder. Table up, on the other hand, I have to press and hold. And it's going to come up until that foot on the feeder is reached. So I never want to bring it up too high so that it hits the feeding head. I want to make sure that I only bring it up to a certain point, and then I'm going to move the feeder in to engage the back of the paper pile, then finish putting it up all the way. I'm going to zoom out now so you can see that. So now that I have the paper up, where I can engage these back paper stops, I'm going to bring them into the back of the pile, tighten my knob, then I can continue bringing the paper up until this foot on the back is engaged, and that is what regulates the paper height. Table stop is for when we're going in the down position. Sorry, I didn't mean to bump that. I can press stop to stop the paper pile before it reaches the bottom. And again, press and hold up. It's going to come up until that foot engages. I'll get a close-up on that in a minute. Feeder home, if we ever raise and lower the pile and change the position of the sheets, I need to press feeder home. What it does, it cycles the whole feeding head. Get a close-up of that shortly as well. And resets it. Vacuum on and off. Turns the vacuum pump on. Turns it off. Now that is something we normally don't use because when the feeder's in the home position and we press run, it's going to automatically turn the vacuum pump on. Jog, that is to jog forward. So if I press that, the machine's going to engage the rollers and run whatever's in the machine out, which I want to be very careful to make sure I'm not applying laminate film to rollers with no paper in between. And then screen converters, the bottom right button, which we've already covered. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take the camera off the tripod again, and I'm going to go through these table up, showing it hitting the foot on the pile feeder, and I'm also going to show you the feeder home button, how that cycles. Okay, so a close up here. I'm going to go ahead and press table down. You can see the pile is going to start to recede down. I don't want it to go all the way down to the bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and press table stop to stop it there. Now you can see what's going to happen here. These are my back pile guides. I'm going to go ahead and press and hold table up. And when I'm setting up the position of the feeder, I'm just going to bring it up like that and make sure that this is touching the pile lightly. We don't want to cram it into there so that it's bending the paper at all. We want the paper to be able to move against it, but it needs to be close. Now if you watch very closely, you can see that foot in the center there. I'm going to continue to bring the paper up now that I have the feeding head in the right position. And you can hear that little click when that foot is engaged that stops the pile. Now every time we cycle the feeding head, it's going to raise the pile up until it engages that foot. So that's what regulates the table height. I'm going to go ahead and press the feeder home button. I'm going to put this down a little bit and show you what the feeder home button does. So if I stop the machine in mid-cycle, I press feeder home, it's going to cycle the suction cups like you just saw and put the feeder into the home position. It's a common error message that you'll see on the machine. If you press start, you'll get something come up that says feeder not in the home position. And we're going to simply go ahead and press that feeder home button right there. Now I would like to run over a couple adjustments on the back of the machine. I'm going to go ahead, I've moved the feeding head back, and then go ahead and raise the pile up to the point where I can show you how to engage these. So I'm going to loosen that knob on the top, and bring that pile in just to there, tighten that knob up, and then we'll go over adjusting the components on the back of the machine. So what I want to show you now is how that comes up and stops the pile. I'm going to press the table up button and hold it until that foot engages. And you can see that these fingers here on the back are not quite engaging the pile. That's fine for cover stocks. I'm running a 100-pound C2S here. We may need to adjust them tighter to the pile for different sheet thicknesses, but that's a good spot to start, is roughly from the back of the sheet in, about 2 millimeters in, and just right above those sheets. I'm going to go ahead and press run on the machine so you can see how those act and what they do to retard a double sheet. So when I press run, the vacuum is going to start. Suction cups are going to come down and pick up the sheet. And you can see how that just hardly hits the edge of the sheet. It creates an arc in the back of the sheet. Wait until that compressor turns off. Does two things. It flicks down so that if there's two sheets being sucked up, it'll retard the bottom one. The other thing it does is it provides structure so that the back of that sheet is bowed up. It's much easier to feed something when it has structure in that direction to feed it in. The next thing we're going to talk about adjusting is the air blasts. So I'm actually going to take these fingers off, or just move it out of the way so you can see that. So these air blasts here are adjusted again by lifting up on here, and I can raise and lower the height. Now we don't want these to be so engaged to the pile that they're not doing anything on the top sheets. The key is we want the top 5 to 10 sheets here to be fluffed up and separated by that air blast when it runs. So I'm going to pull this sheet back here. Actually, I'm just leave it there. Press run. So you can see that air going into that pile and fluffing those sheets up. This could actually be a little bit higher, so I'm going to bring it up. And again, I want the top 5 to 10 sheets to be nicely separated like that. That's going to allow for perfect separation while my feeder picks the pile. As far as my feeder height goes, if I was to turn this knob here, so you can see it's a screw, it's going to close this gap and lift this up. Keep in mind that when I do that, I also need to adjust my air blast as well as my retarder fingers so that they're in relation to the sheet how they were before. Now let's go ahead while the machine's running and take a look at the front of the feeder. So you can see the sheets are coming in, and as they're traveling you can see that these little brown brushes are putting some pressure on the sheet. But what that's doing is it's helping drive the sheets up against the gate, which is here inside the machine underneath the paper so you can't see it. When the sheet stops, you'll watch this brown roller stop moving. Now I can adjust the pressure that those exert by loosening these jam nuts and turning those screws. Generally, they never need to be played with, and the factory setting is sufficient. The other thing we can see here, I'm just going to get a different shot from down below. Is the gray rollers engaging. So when the gate goes down, those gray rollers drop and advance the sheet that is waiting at the gate. Watch, they're pneumatically operated. And right now, it went down. Engage the sheet and take it through. So on the control panel, I'm going to go ahead and hit stop. So the machine stopped for me. I'm going to go ahead and put the table down. I'm going to go ahead and press table stop. I don't need it to go all the way down. I'm just going to pull these sheets back. I'm not running any laminate in the machine right now, just for training purposes. And I'm going to go through the cycle again of starting the feeder, but this time I'm going to show you what happens at the front. So again, the table is down. The position of my feeding head is already set. I don't need to change that. I'm going to come up here and press table up. I'm going to hold it down until that foot is engaged and the table stops. I'm still holding it, but the table is stopped. I can release it now. You can see there's no paper in the machine at all, so if I had this webbed with laminate, I'd need to manually load a sheet underneath the web here, underneath the roller here, to ensure that I don't get adhesive on the bottom rollers. I strongly recommend that we start this process with 5 to 10 sheets on the top that are plain, white, and actually start the feeding process before you load any laminate film onto the machine. So you can see now, I'm going to go down here, press the run button. These rollers start to turn, but there's no paper here yet. You see the first sheet come in, the brown rollers push it to the gate, and the gate drops and lets that sheet feed into the roller. That's the basic overview of the Podtopic deep pile automatic feeder. The only time that we're going to change any of these settings is if we're changing stocks. It's an incredibly reliable device to feed paper consistently, hour after hour, day after day, month after month.